Well, Writer's Digest is a magazine for beginning writers. What a lot of those beginning writers don't know is that major publishers take that magazine too, and they read it. And the very next day, I got calls from almost every major publisher in America and a couple from overseas. By the way, these were also publishers that I had previously submitted my manuscript to, and they had all rejected it. Most of them reject it in a way that you never really know it's rejected. You just never hear back. And I also got a call from a number of agents who wanted to represent me in the book. And it was going to be hard to pick which agent I should go to. But one fella in particular was persistent. And as we talked, I realized that he had actually read the book. Whereas a lot of them just raved on about it. And I began to recognize phrases from the magazine article. And I knew it was unlikely they had gotten a hold of the book in this quick order to read it. This was prior to the days of ebooks. So this is back around the turn of the century. This one fellow, his name was Joe Durepos. And Joe worked in the inspirational field, and he had good relationships and sold a lot of books to a lot of major publishers. As Joe talked to me about it, I got a real good feeling about him. We're about the same age. He was a devout Catholic. I had been a Mormon. And we had a similar understanding of religion and of inspiration and of matters of the heart and of the spirit. So I said to Joe, I said, fine, you can represent me on it. And it didn't take but 3 or 4 weeks before Joe was able to secure a deal with HarperCollins. Now, HarperCollins is the world's biggest publisher. They publish everybody, including people as divergent as Andrew Weil, Anne Rice, Michael Crichton. We signed a deal with HarperCollins and their imprint, which is now Harper One, for the republishing rights to Dad Was a Carpenter. The payout was enormous. A real shock, a real surprise to me. And when I got introduced to my editor, who would help us make the transition from my Dad Was a Carpenter to their version of it, I asked him as just curious. I said, I submitted that book to you guys already. You could have had it for a song. But I'm curious to know, what your take on the book was, because I never heard back from you. Now, not to him personally, but to the publisher. He said, well, I'll look into it. He didn't really want to do it, but he did. And he found on their computer system, and he called me back, and he said, well, Ken, he said, it says here that your manuscript was shredded unopened. Now, when a publisher receives an unrepresented manuscript, i.e. without an agent, they will basically just throw it into the shredder because they just don't have the time to look at them. And they get thousands of submissions a week, no doubt. And they buy from people who can snag an agent. An agent is kind of a gatekeeper, an unpaid gatekeeper for them. If they work with an agent in the past and they've sold books to them, then this agent has proven his mettle, and therefore they want to work with them again, especially if that previous book had sold. And Joe had worked with this particular editor before. The editor's name was Gideon Weil, and they had worked together, sold some books, had a good relationship, and so that's the person to whom Joe took my book. Well, Gideon says they shredded your manuscript unopened. I'm very sorry. It just struck me funny because I said, no problem. I thought they rejected it on its merits. So those of you who submit books to publishers and never hear a word, yeah, your manuscript was probably shredded and unopened. Bottom line is, they didn't reject it because it was bad. They rejected it because they're too busy to look at it. And when I finally met Gideon and I went to his office, as I looked around, I noticed basically 3 stacks of stuff. One was just enormous stack of stuff just sitting on the floor. And another was over in a kind of a bookshelf area, and a third was on the desk. I said, what is all this stuff? He goes, well, that on the floor, that is addressed to me, but I don't know who from. He said, that's going to the shredder probably. The second batch over there is addressed to me. It looked interesting, the idea. If I get time, I'm gonna look at it. But on my desk are agented manuscripts from people I know, maybe from authors I know, at least I know the agents. Those are the ones that I'm really gonna be able to give my time to. He said, and I don't have very many hours per week to consider all these manuscripts because I'm busy editing the ones we've already purchased. And I looked at that old mouse and I went, the only reason that I'm here, of course, is because I won this award with Writer's Digest. And Gideon goes, absolutely. He said, we read that magazine. All the agents read the magazine. We're always on the lookout for the next big writer. I go, well, here I am.